If you have a child, you have seen a temper tantrum. Today we're going to talk about how to deal with your child's temper tantrums.
Vicky, you said in the intro, if you've got a child, you've dealt with temper tantrums.
You bet.
That's probably the most important first place to start. This happens. It's a normal part of childhood. It's going to happen.
And it's always going to happen in young children, always. And it sometimes happens in older children.
Or even adults.
Yeah, even yourself at occasion.
We've talked in other videos about the 3 stages of moral development. If you haven't yet reviewed those, please hook into that. Teaching Children Responsibility is one of the titles that you can look for here in the Positive Parenting playlist to get an overview of those 3 stages. That's important because regardless of the age of the child, the stage of moral development is what determines their behavior. And that's going to really help to clear up a few things. So we encourage you to go take a look at that if you haven't.
So why do kids have temper tantrums?
Let's start with just the basic developmental expectation. Because young children particularly have a very difficult time regulating their affect or emotions.
Yeah, so whatever they feel immediately just comes at them so strong.
It can overwhelm them.
Yeah.
And you'll see this as your child takes on an emotion.
Yeah.
One of our neighbors was holding his little daughter who's about 18 months old, and I've had a little crush on this little girl for a while. She's so cute, and she had this big alligator tear right here stuck on her eye. And I just interacted with her and I said, "Millie, what's with the tear?" And she's just barely learning how to talk, and she and I could just see the affect just starting to overwhelm her. And she said, "I miss Mommy." And she just burst out into this flood of emotion, which normally as adults, that's not going to happen to us.
Right.
I mean, maybe it will from time to time. But the whole point is, for young children, they cannot regulate that.
Well, and especially one more piece is the dad had just said, "Thanks a lot." You know, he had just got to calm down because it does take a lot of effort sometimes to get, for a child especially, to regulate and to rein in that emotion, and the smallest thing can trigger it. And that's where the temper tantrums come from.
Right. So it's a normal developmental thing. Now, how are we going to help our children with that?
Remember, at first, a tantrum comes because the child can't regulate their behavior,
Right.
Their emotions. They can't regulate their emotions. And so they just kind of pile up and come out in a tantrum, right? But depending on how we respond or deal with that tantrum, they can then become not just an emotional irregulation, but they can actually become manipulation because we paid them off for having the tantrum.
This is behavioral psychology. You can reinforce a behavior without meaning to. In other words, if you give them the payoff, let's say that you're at the grocery store and your child starts throwing a tantrum because they want the piece of candy.
Right.
And remember, they can't regulate their emotion, and so they feel it, and it's real for them.
It's real that they really want it, and they're not getting it.
They're not pretending to be distressed.
Yeah, the disappointment is so overwhelming to them.
So, the emotion comes out. Now, how's mom feeling at that point? A little awkward, a little uncomfortable. We're out here in public, and so what is she likely to do? Anything she can to calm this kid down, right? So if she gives the child what the child wants, that reinforces the behavior. And this is kind of a trap for parents because we want to end the behavior. Well, our kids are training us to give them what they want. So be aware of that, and they're not doing it maliciously. It just happens to work. So they do it. Sometimes you'll know you're on the right track when things get a little worse.
That is a hard pill to swallow.
But and it's because, especially if there's been a pattern of reinforcement of that behavior, the child might start thinking at some level, "Oh man, this always used to work with Mom. I must be losing my touch. I better turn up the volume."
Right.
And then they crank up the volume. And if you cave in at that point, it makes it even worse. So we could get into all the behavioral psychology behind that. But basically, you want to take away some of those payoffs that they're getting for the tantrums.
So there's two things I wanted to hit right here. We talked about this being how do you deal with your child's tantrum, right?
Right.
I think we have kind of two things we're talking about. One is a normal tantrum as they start to develop. And the way that we deal with that
Right.
is really important. We're going to want to try to buy a little time, just kind of pause. We got to model some calm behavior, some calm response, calm face, calm voice. What is it you always say about how long will it take? Go back to that one.
Oh, you know what? That was our friend Craig.
Yeah, that's such a funny story.
When his son Aaron was just, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years old, they were in the car and Aaron was throwing a temper tantrum. Just going bonsai there in the back seat, in the car seat. And Craig simply asked him, Aaron, how long do you need for this tantrum? And this little kid comes up with 2 minutes. And he said it all upset. And he's still having that emotional overload that we talked about. But you know what? Craig just accepted that. He's like, okay. And he just chilled. He just wait. And you have to buy some time because it takes a little while for that to calm down physiologically.
Well, it's real. Physiologically, it is real.
Yeah.
This affect that's out of control.
But you know what? Having bought the time, Aaron very shortly after that said, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. So,
Now, these results are not typical. We're not guaranteeing that that's going to happen with your kid. But buying a little bit of time gives them some space.
yeah.
And it also says, you know what? You're going to get through this.
And
it's going to clear.
You actually give them some power
Right.
and time to learn how to get in control of their emotions,
Which
their
is
feeling.
part of what we're trying to train them to do
exactly
anyway.
what we're hoping they learn. So the second part I was talking about is the child who has a pattern of tantruming now. How do we deal with that? And you mentioned just before that it might get a little worse. You always are going to have more of a storm before the calm. So when you are now ready, I have inadvertently built a bit of a tantrum monster. And I'm not saying your child is a monster, but sometimes we reinforce the child. The child is tantruming on a regular basis, right? They have learned that is one of the ways they get what they want. Because we have reinforced it. Not even in realizing that's what we've done. And so you have taken control of yourself because remember, that's the only person you can control.
That's hard enough.
Yeah. And now I'm going to try something different. Just be ready. Be ready for it to get worse before it gets better. And expect that. Now, refer back to some of our other videos about how to control your anger, because if your expectation is that it is going to get worse before it gets better, you don't have to respond in an angry way. You can keep calm. You can model the calmness. You can model all of the different thinking patterns that we've been teaching you in these videos.
You'll be able to roll with it because now it matches your expectation and you're ready for it.
Right.
Temper tantrums. There's a lot of different things we deal with as parents. Thank you for being a conscious, positive parent. We're honored to be on your team. Please join us at parentingpowerup.com. We've got some great things for you there, including a free training that you can get in on. Come join our community.
In the street alone. Her head was down, face locked onto the phone.